Tell me a little bit about your father.
My father is one of the most decorated law enforcement officers and civic leaders in this part of the state. I am here because unfortunately he passed away on October 26th, one day after his 83rd birthday. And his will to live was absolutely incredible. They nicked the main artery to his heart during surgery 20 years ago and sewed him back up. Didn't know it, sewed him back up. Got him back on the table, did another totally unnecessary 4-hour surgery because he was bleeding internally. So ever since then, we've been afraid of losing him. And so many times they said, this is it, this is it. And he kept bouncing back. So the fact he was in hospice and really was suffering at the point of his birthday, the day before he passed. But that was his way of saying, when somebody told him he might die, he rallied and pulled it together and bounced back he was a study case at the Medical University of South Carolina. And they looked at him like the anomaly he was. His living until his birthday was like his last hurrah. It was like, see, I told y'all thought I was going to die, and I lived another year. So that was the amazing thing about him. In terms of his law enforcement career, he grew up in Grayson County, rural Grayson County. He spent 4 years in the United States Coast Guard as a radio operator. When the assassination of President Kennedy took place, he was the first one on that huge ship to receive the message as they were out over the North Atlantic. So he took the message in Morse code and delivered it to the captain. And then, after 4 years with the Coast Guard, rescuing poor soldiers that had frozen to death and things like that. Pretty traumatic experience. The day after he got out of the Coast Guard, they accepted him into the High Point Police Department, and he was working the High Point Police Department beginning in 1966 through 1974, which was pivotal in the civil rights movement. His colleagues had a shootout with the Black Panthers in 1971, and his role was to guard a gentleman who had been wounded, a member of the Panther Party. He guarded his hospital room, but he was a motorcycle cop. And he went from rookie cop to a motorcycle cop to patrol cop to detective, and then he left there as detective sergeant and sergeant of the narcotics division. He went to the Wythe County Sheriff's Office. Another fellow police officer there, Wayne Pike, was coming back to his hometown of Wythe County to run for sheriff. And he said, if I run and I'm elected, I'll make you the chief deputy. So he became the chief deputy here in 1980. That's where he met my mother, who was a little 19-year-old redhead working in court services, and fell in love with her. They married 4 years later. I came along a year later, and my sister 6 years later, and that's how we ended up growing up here. And I've made my home here all my 40 years with my wife and lovely daughter Bella, who's 11, and apple of her pop's eye for sure. So while he was here in Wythe County, the important things that he did, well, initially he worked the department from Wythe County to Pulaski to Vinton all of those departments were departments that had either been virtually disgraced before he got there or just in horrible need of reinvention. So every place he went, he worked it from the ground up. There are people who told me that before my dad came to Wythe County, they didn't even know how to get in touch with the police. So while he was here, the 911 system was brought here. He was head of the Emergency Planning Committee, the Transportation Safety Committee, which instituted all the seatbelt laws that are here today that are saving the lives of Wythevillians today, especially his granddaughter. He instituted the DARE program, which I went through the DARE program in school. I had no idea that my father was the one that brought it here, but he certainly did. And my daughter goes through those classes, and she was very proudly, my pop started this program. She didn't mind telling people, so, and that's great. And the ultimate achievement of his career was in 1983 when you have to be invited into this program. And then once you're invited, it is a rigorous 12-week course. And you are chosen with officers in every state of the Union and 11 foreign countries. And so not only was he chosen, but he graduated from that program in 1983. And he considers that the pinnacle of his career. And I don't blame him. He had friends, police officer friends from all over the world that he could call for information, that he exchanged Christmas cards with, that he could call for technological upgrades. And what he was exceptional about was procuring grants for things that would otherwise, if we take this initiative, we have to spend the taxpayers' money. He was remarkable at procuring grants for Wythe County. And during his time in Wythe County, and as chief in Pulaski, and as chief in Vinton, he secured, I would say, well, let's just say millions of dollars in grant funding. I know well over $1 million while he was in Pulaski, well over $1 million while he was in Vinton, and I would say well over $1 million here, but I don't know the exact number for Wythe County. But when he was in Wythe County, he decided to run for clerk of court, and he lost that race pretty resoundingly. And that was a major letdown for all of us. We were all devastated. In my opinion, it's the biggest loss Wythe County ever gave themselves. So at that point, he decided about 3 years later, he was offered the job of chief of police in Pulaski, and he went to take that position. So when he went to take that position, the chief had just resigned. Many other officers were resigning because they were having issues about equal pay. And my dad went in and said, these men and women are putting their lives on the line every day. They deserve to be paid what they should be paid. So he went in and he fixed that budget, and he said, all right, I've got you equal pay. Now you gotta make sure you earn it. So he brought a K-9 unit into Pulaski. He brought a bicycle troop into Pulaski, which was to take care of the on-foot drug trafficking, because huge drug trafficking in Pulaski in those days, and unfortunately still today. And just basically just renovated, and none of this at the cost of the taxpayer, by the way, all funded through grant money. And he was working to get them through state accreditation, but didn't quite make it before he was offered the job in Vinton. And I should say, just to tie this in context, when Dad went into a position, he stayed for a long time. High Point, 14 years. With County, 14 years. He only had 6 years in Pulaski because you had a lot of older people on the town council that were not aware of what they were saying. He says, I need 20 deputies for this. And somebody would say, well, you don't need that many deputies. And he said, okay, you know more than I do. How many do I need? And she said, well, I don't know. He said, that's the point, I do know. And so it was just, and he was living in Wytheville at the time, and this was my fault because I gave him so much flack for taking a job out of town because I didn't want to leave schools. My mom didn't make us switch schools, so he was driving back and forth to Wytheville. And one of the town council's campaigning points was, we don't need to pay the chief's transportation back and forth to Wytheville. So he said, I'll get a radio at my personal expense and install it in my car. And of course the town manager said, tell him not to worry about any of that crap. Within the first year that he was there, he reversed their crime rate exponentially. He got in there and turned it around. He started a citizens police academy in both Pulaski and Vinton, in which local citizens could take a 12-week course to know what it was like to be in law enforcement and what people had to go through. And great learning educational programs for children. He got them a brand new fleet of updated cars. And he said, all right, now that I got you these cars, you better take care of them. And he did that in 6 years. You know, that's a lot of stuff in a very short time. And he was not appreciated there. So he left in 2000. He was offered the job in Vinton. By this time, he was 57, so we're reaching retirement age. He had only planned to stay 5 to 7 years. He was also president of the Virginia Chiefs of Police Association during this time. He had only planned to stay 5 to 7 years. He ended up staying 11 because it was a smaller agency, but it was better pay, and the people just loved him there. And that Vinton Police Department, he got them a new fleet. He did all the things he did for Pulaski. It was a disgraced department again. I think the chief had been in some trouble before. Not sure on that. Have to read the book if you want to know the truth on it, because it's in there. But he brought that small little department. He made it one of the first departments in the state of Virginia to ever be credited to receive full state accreditation by the Department of Criminal Justice Services. So that was another high point in his career. And in Wytheville, he was the president of the Chamber of Commerce. He was in the Rural Retreat Lake Authority, which handles, the campground and all the things that happen at the fairgrounds. Used to be all the big county happenings. The 4th of July happened at the fairgrounds over in Rural Retreat. And he put that 4th of July thing together every year, and it wore him out, but everybody in the county would show up. And he did a really amazing job, and I'm sure that I'm leaving out so many of his civic duties. He was an adjunct professor at Wytheville Community College for police science, and I hope to be able to get a scholarship in his name at some point for those who want to go into police science. He has a great grandson at VCU where he got his master's degree in criminal justice administration, who is also studying criminal justice, which he was very, very proud of that. I'm trying to think of everything he did, but it's just mind-boggling. But as a father, he was a hedge of security. He made everyone, including my wife, whom I married 15 years ago, he brought everybody in and made them feel safe. He never wanted me to cry, and having cerebral palsy, you're much more emotional, so that we kind of clashed at times over that, because I'm a very emotional person. Not one to directly say important things, but the older he got and the sicker he was, not big on hugging, but the older he got, I made him hug me, and then by the end of that time, he was willing to hug me and readily said, "I love you," and those kinds of things. My sister, who was 6 years younger than me, that was his baby. She's Daddy's little girl. He was almost 50 years old when she was born. He has two older children that are almost as old as my mother. He robbed the cradle when he met Mom, and thank God he did, because that gave him a second family, you know. So from that second family, he only has the one granddaughter from me, whom he never thought he would get one from, and I'm, thrilled about that. And Bella adores her pop, and we didn't get to see him enough. When he retired, he moved to the South Carolina coast, and he and my mother lived in Myrtle Beach, Merle's Inlet, Surfside. It was Merle's Inlet where he passed away at his home. He was very interested in genealogy. We closed out his ancestry account, and we recovered over 300 pages of research that he had done on the family going back to the 1600s. If he could have drawn it back to Adam, he would have. My favorite memories of him are Saturday morning breakfast at the Waffle House. We loved breakfast food, so we would do Saturday morning trips to the Waffle House. I was the one that was interested in family history, so we go to the cemeteries a lot, and this is where this grandmother was buried, and these are the stories that I remember, and we would have Scrabble tournaments. He was a crossword puzzle nut, and it was impossible to beat him. That was a cure for my depression, for when friends didn't come to take me out on weekends, because obviously I couldn't get out on my own. And I was depressed because a friend that was supposed to come take me out didn't show up. He said, "You want to play a game of Scrabble?" So we played a game of Scrabble, and of course he beat the tar out of me. And then I said, let's play again next week. So we played again next week, and I beat him. And to beat Herb Cooley at Scrabble, that is winning the championship. So he was proud of me. He patted me on the back. The second week we played, I beat him again, and he smiled. He said, "Wow, I'm impressed." The third week I beat him again, and he didn't say a word. And then the next week I said, "Are you ready to play Scrabble?" And he said, you really should get out. You want to call one of your friends and see if they'll come over and pick you up? He didn't want to be beat again. So those are the wonderful things that I remember. And of course, being able to see him get on the monument and see 5 generations of family come out to honor him, being able to see him be grandfather to my daughter, being able to do the book and to give it to him, those are things that not everybody gets to share, and I understand that it's special, and he means the world to me. As I've told you, I feel like a little boy that's roaming around in the dark looking for his dad, and I'm 40 years old, and we're all just lost. We've lost our hedge of security, our strength, our patriarch, the one that professed to us to eat healthy and to use hydrogen peroxide. It's nature's remedy. And he took a shot of apple cider vinegar every morning for the millions of health benefits that he would list every time he took a shot of apple cider vinegar. He was just that kind of person, very interested in staying healthy and doing what you were supposed to do. And that's how come he lasted to 83.
I guess that was awesome. I'm trying to think. I have so many questions, but I guess tell me, what was it like, being a little boy, growing up watching your father, as, in charge of law enforcement, doing these kinds of scary jobs?
It was really wonderful to have a dad who was a police officer. I remember him coming into my kindergarten class in full uniform and reading a Bernstein Bears book to our class. And everybody's like, wow, look at his uniform. And I'm like, that's my dad. And I was so proud that he, my parents were working professionals all the time. They were not involved in a lot of school things. My mother was a social worker for 40 years. So they were working all the time, and they weren't able to volunteer for things like that. So when my dad showed up, it was a big deal. And when he was running for clerk of court, he sent a pack of pencils for me to hand out to my first grade class, and how proud I was that day, And as I told you, I had the run of the place, I was like the little mascot for the sheriff's office. I got to lead every Christmas, well, not lead, I was in every Christmas parade. And the first year that he was chief in Pulaski, he came back to Withville, and we led the parade. The parade went our car first, and then the rest of the parade. Those kinds of things were some really cool perks of being the chief deputy's son, and then later the son of the chief of police, And then there was one really scary time where there used to be Wythe County Jail just a block or two from here, and he would stop at the jail to fill up his police car. They had their own gas pump back there, and you fill up the cars that you drove in. Well, my mom and dad and my baby sister was in the back asleep, and we pulled around there at about 9 o'clock one night, and there was two guys in ski masks running around the place. They were trying to sneak something up to one of the prisoners, and I saw my dad take off and chase this guy, and my first thought was, what if he's got a gun? And I used to have nightmares about being in the car with my dad and a guy with a gun, and Dad getting out of the car and going towards the guy with the gun. Me being so afraid he would get shot. And then in 1994, one of his colleagues, Cliff Dicker, did get shot and killed in the line of duty. And I thought at that time, what if that was my father? So that does enter your mind. He worked things that he never said till he retired. He would have to examine dead bodies that had been there maybe a month, and he never talked about any of it. So no wonder he maybe wasn't as emotional or as receptive to birthdays, holidays, this kind of thing, or saying I love you and those kind of things, because he had to be hardened by the things he saw. And I never understood what he went through and everything that he was achieving when I was kind of resenting him for missing those birthdays or whatever it was that he missed. He really never missed birthdays, but when he wasn't there for a certain school function or wasn't there when I wanted him to go with me to this or that, and I was disappointed as a kid, he was doing all these things. And then, you know, when he retires, he doesn't retire till he's 68 years old. So he obviously enjoyed what he did. And I go to this retirement party, and there's speech after speech after speech from these distinguished officers from 2 different states, you know, and chiefs from everywhere that came to say, I became a chief of police because of Herb Cooley. I was honored just to be interviewed by Herb Cooley, even though I didn't take the job. And so many, I mean, hundreds, maybe even 1,000 by now, condolences that have poured into me. I really loved your dad. And that means so much. And it's very important. I hope that he heard enough of that while he was here. Like, I don't want all this coming out now that he's gone. It should, you know. And I'm very grateful to the Wythe County Board of Supervisors for lowering the flag at half-mast for him the day before his funeral, because he deserves that.
And tell me a little bit about this book we have over here. I'm going to go ahead and actually hand it to you. Mm-hmm. If you can tell me a little bit about what motivated you to write this story about your father. You got it?
When I was at his retirement party, I heard officers from 2 states, 14 different speakers, all of them very distinguished in their own way, including his dear friend and field training officer, Bill Collins, whom he grew up with in Grayson County, who's now left us, tell all these wonderful stories about him. And I said, there's a side of my father that I don't know, that I need to know. So I took my journalistic research skills and spent the next 2 years interviewing 24 colleagues, including his own brother, Doug, who became a very successful police officer in his own right because he wanted to be like his big brother, right under his nose, and developed this book that is now my pride and joy because it is what I have left of him and what I have to talk about him to people with. And I presented a rough draft copy to him on the 50th anniversary of his becoming a police officer, and said, there it is. And he was absolutely stupefied. Those are his words. I'm just stupefied. And it is the biggest selling book. I've written 20 books, and this one has sold more copies than any. And I hope it always will be #1, because it'll always be #1 to me, just as he is.
Perfect. I can grab the book from you again. I just wanted to make sure I got a shot of you talking about the book a little bit. And so this question might be a little bit more difficult.
And that's okay.
But it's been less than a week since he passed away.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of support coming in from the community, you know, passing along their condolences. But how are you feeling?
I am feeling good as long as I am doing something to honor him in some way. I can cope just fine. But, and it, you know, it's still to me that, oh, he's still 6 hours away. And when I get to the funeral on Saturday, I can say, look, Pop, look what I made for you, and watch him beam proudly. And then when he's not going to be there is when it's going to be really hard. I promised him I would get through his eulogy without crying, which I will do one way or another, but really the test is going to be when all this is over, when the condolences stop coming in, when the press stops wanting to talk about Herb Cooley. And because he's gone, they're not going to want to talk about him again. It's not going to be, he's not going to have another achievement that is going to make the news. And he's going to need me to go talk about him and brag on him. When that stops is when it's going to be really hard.
To know that your dad has made this profound legacy on law enforcement in Southwest Virginia, and just the people in Southwest Virginia in general, you know, they're much safer having him in their lives. How does that make you feel?
Wythe County is the greatest place in the world to bring up a daughter. It's the greatest place in the world to bring up his granddaughter. And that is so largely due to him. So the reason that my wife and I and my daughter can walk and roll up these sidewalks about the mile it is from my house from here to this courthouse is because he did so much to make it a safe place. And the things that he did are still saving lives today. So as long as I'm around, I will proudly be saying that probably to random people on the street, you're walking this street safely because of my dad.